You won't believe how everything changed that day. What began as a seemingly ordinary court appearance slowly transformed into a moment that would follow one name for years to come. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about the schedule, nothing dramatic on the docket, nothing to suggest that this would be remembered as a turning point. It looked routine, procedural, and almost boring to those who had seen dozens of similar cases before. But sometimes, the moments that change everything don't arrive with chaos. Sometimes they arrive quietly, disguised as normal. Porsha Williams walked into that courtroom with the kind of confidence people had grown used to seeing. It was the same presence she had displayed on television, on red carpets, and across social media for years. Calm, collected, unbothered. To fans and observers alike, she appeared fearless, like someone who had already secured her place in the world, someone who had already won. There was no visible hesitation in her posture, no nervous energy, no sign that she expected anything other than another legal formality. And that was exactly why what followed felt so shocking. The room itself felt calm at first. Cameras were positioned carefully. Reporters whispered to one another, already planning headlines they assumed would be forgettable by the next news cycle. People in attendance believed they were about to witness nothing more than a brief appearance followed by a quick exit. The atmosphere was professional, almost dull. No raised voices, no dramatic reactions, just the quiet hum of expectation that comes with routine legal proceedings. No one suspected that destiny was about to take an unexpected turn. Then Dennis McKinley stood up. It wasn't dramatic, there was no outburst or sudden movement, but something shifted in the air the moment he rose. His body language looked different from what people expected. There was a seriousness to him, a sense of finality that hadn't been present before. Observers later said they felt the tension even before they understood why. It was subtle but unmistakable. People assumed he would speak briefly and sit back down. Instead, he handed over documents, and with that simple action, everything began to unravel. This is where it gets interesting. Those documents weren't ordinary paperwork. They weren't harmless records or procedural forms meant to move the case along. They were receipts, detailed, specific, and heavy with implication, the kind of paperwork that doesn't just answer questions, but creates new ones. As the judge began reviewing them, the mood in the courtroom changed completely. Whispers spread across the room. Journalists leaned forward. Faces that had looked bored just moments earlier now showed surprise, concern, and curiosity. Something serious was unfolding, and everyone could feel it. Porsha, who had remained calm up until that point, looked confused. The confidence she had walked in with began to fade, replaced by uncertainty. Her expression shifted slowly, as if she was trying to process information in real time, while realizing that she was no longer in control of the narrative. The room felt heavy, silent. Every second seemed longer than the last. People watching later said they could feel the tension through their screens, as if the atmosphere itself had weight. What made this moment even more intense was the realization that these receipts were not just about money. They hinted at deeper issues, secrets, decisions, choices that were never meant to be examined in public. The silence in the courtroom grew louder with each page the judge turned. It felt like everyone understood that once these details were acknowledged, there would be no undoing the damage. A powerful public image was beginning to crack, right there in front of everyone. What made this story different from countless other legal disputes was not just the evidence itself, but the person who brought it forward. This was not an outsider looking in. This was someone who had once been close, someone who had shared private moments, trust, and personal history. That familiarity made everything feel more personal, more painful, and more explosive. The courtroom stopped feeling like a neutral legal space and started feeling like a place where a personal life was being pulled apart piece by piece. Things escalated quickly after that. Reporters rushed to send updates before the session even ended. Social media began buzzing almost instantly. People sensed this was not a minor issue, not a passing controversy. This felt like the beginning of something much bigger. Porsha remained seated, trying to understand what was happening, while outside the courtroom, the world was already reacting. Opinions formed faster than facts. Assumptions spread faster than explanations. As the judge continued reviewing the documents, it became clear that the questions raised would not have easy answers. The receipts pointed toward patterns rather than isolated mistakes. Transactions appeared connected, dates repeated, names showed up more than once. Yep, you heard that right. What initially looked like a single dispute began to feel like something far deeper. The whispers in the room grew louder, and even those who supported her felt uncertainty creeping in.
But here's the shocking part. The documents didn't stop at finances. They raised questions about events, public appearances, and causes that people had trusted for years. Platforms that once symbolized generosity and empowerment were suddenly under suspicion. That contrast shocked many observers. The same image that had earned praise was now being questioned, and that shift was uncomfortable to witness. Admiration slowly turned into doubt, and doubt quickly turned into scrutiny. Dennis McKinley's role became impossible to ignore. People began asking, why now? Why this moment? Why bring everything forward at this stage? Some believed it was revenge, others believed it was pressure. But no matter the motivation, the impact was immediate and intense. Destiny had taken another unexpected turn, and it was clear that he was not holding back. Whatever his reasons were, the fallout was undeniable. As the legal proceedings continued inside the courtroom, the real storm was building outside. News spread rapidly, phones buzzed non-stop, updates flooded timelines. Within minutes, the story was everywhere. Let me tell you, the public reaction did not wait for clarity or confirmation. Opinions solidified almost instantly. The moment this story left the courtroom, it stopped being just a legal matter and became a cultural conversation. The craziest part was how quickly people began connecting dots. Old interviews resurfaced, past statements were replayed, forgotten clips were analyzed frame by frame. Fans revisited moments that once seemed harmless, but now felt questionable. Each discovery raised more questions instead of offering answers. The line between truth and rumor began to blur, and that made everything more intense. Inside the courtroom, the pressure was visible. Porsha looked overwhelmed, as if she was realizing that this was no longer just a case to manage. It felt like her entire public life was being examined under a harsh spotlight. Every move from the past suddenly mattered. Every word seemed relevant. The silence around her felt isolating, even though the room was full. As days passed, it became clear that the consequences were not limited to what had already happened. They hinted at what was still coming. Careers, partnerships, and reputations were now at risk. This was no longer about one shocking moment. It was about survival. As the court session moved toward a pause, one thing was clear. This was not the peak of the controversy. This was only the middle. And then everything spiraled. Once the courtroom doors closed, the real trial began outside. Social media turned into its own courtroom, with millions of voices acting as judges and jurors. Yep, you heard that right. People spoke as if they had been present themselves, replaying every detail again and again. Old smiles were questioned, past success was reinterpreted. What once looked inspiring now felt suspicious. What made this story different was that it wasn't just gossip. Fans felt personally affected. Many believed they had supported something authentic and real. When doubt entered that belief, it hurt deeply. Reactions were emotional, loud, and divided. Some defended her fiercely, others criticized her relentlessly. The middle ground disappeared completely. Screenshots circulated, timelines were built. Strangers became investigators overnight. Every detail mattered. As the noise grew louder, Porsha remained mostly silent. That silence became its own statement. Some saw it as resilience, others saw it as fear. Destiny took yet another unexpected turn as intentions were questioned, not just actions. Brands and partners began making quiet moves. Pages went dark, mentions disappeared, associations faded without explanation. These silent decisions spoke louder than any official statement. The consequences were no longer theoretical, they were real, professional, and permanent.
However, one thing that really stood out to me was how much more calculated Porsha was this time around. You can tell she learned from what she didn't get in her divorce from Cordell. Back then, she walked away without much. No house, no major financial cushion, no long-term protection. And so this time, she made sure the prenuptial agreement worked in her favor. She made sure she secured spousal support. She made sure her name was attached to the home. She made sure she wouldn't be left scrambling if things fell apart. But what she didn't seem to fully grasp is that Simon Guobadia has allegedly been scamming since the 1980s. And I don't say that lightly. This man is not new to financial gymnastics, international maneuvering, or legal loopholes. Do I need to bring receipts? Because I have receipts. And a lot of you already suspected that something wasn't adding up long before this divorce ever became public. On paper, the prenup looks great for Porsha. She was awarded $40,000 a month in spousal support for 14 months. She was given possession of the $7 million mansion she filmed in all season. She's allowed to live there for a few years if she doesn't refinance or sell immediately. But there's a huge catch that people keep glossing over. If she sells the house, she has to give Simon 50% of the equity. And that raises the biggest question of all. Is there even any equity in that house? Because just because a house is listed at $7 million does not mean there's $7 million sitting there waiting to be split. Mortgages, loans, liens, and debts eat away at value very quickly. And if Simon is claiming his business empire went from being worth nearly $300 million to nothing overnight, that tells me there may not be much equity there at all. I don't know if Porsha knew this when she fought so hard to keep that house, or if she's just now realizing what she's actually holding on to. Now let's talk about the other home, the so-called Dutch home, because this part of the story matters more than people think. After Porsha divorced Cordell, she lived in that home for years. That was her safe place. That was her stability. Eventually, she transferred that home to her mother, Miss Diane, and now, suddenly, that house is on the market for about $1.85 million. So the obvious question is, why now? Where is Miss Diane going to live? Most likely with Porsha in the $7 million house. And honestly, from a financial standpoint, that makes sense. Maintaining one expensive property is easier than maintaining two, especially when you don't know how long your income stream is going to stay consistent and when legal issues are still unfolding. Selling the Dutch home could be about consolidation, protection, and preparing for what might be coming next. And that brings us to the biggest bombshell. According to US Weekly, Simon Guobadia has failed to pay his divorce attorneys, who have now filed a six-figure attorney's lien against the $7 million home. Yes, the same home Porsha currently lives in. And let me ask you something. Who do you think leaked this information? Because if you remember, US Weekly was one of the very first outlets Simon spoke to when all of this started. So it wouldn't shock me at all if this story came directly from his camp. The lien was officially filed on June 10th. The divorce was finalized on June 11th. That timing is not accidental. That tells me this was strategic. Filing a lien the day before the divorce is finalized ensures that the property is immediately complicated, immediately tied up, and immediately less valuable. Add to that the fact that Simon was detained by ICE, deported, and is now reportedly in Dubai dealing with immigration issues, and it starts to look like he's positioning himself in a way where collecting money from him becomes very difficult. This man is not new to this kind of behavior, allegedly. Let's not forget that while the home technically belonged to Simon before the marriage, Porsha made sure it was included in the prenup. Since then, Simon has gone on interviews claiming he was blindsided, manipulated, and preyed upon. Sir, please. The court did not buy that story for 1 second. The judge ruled that the prenuptial agreement was valid and enforceable.
The court specifically noted that Porsha had been a reality TV celebrity for years, and Simon knew exactly who he was marrying. At no point did Porsha publicly declare that she was leaving television forever to become a stay-at-home mom, and even during their marriage, she filmed Porsha's Family Matters, Ultimate Girls Trip, and eventually returned to RHOA. So the argument that she misrepresented herself fell flat. Simon also told the court that his company's value dropped from $296 million to nothing overnight, and the judge essentially said, "That doesn't make sense." The court found his testimony inconsistent and lacking credibility, pointing out that Simon had previously run his company internationally while spending more than half the year outside the United States. The judge even stated that the idea of nearly $300 million disappearing without recovery strained credibility.
That's legal language for "we don't believe you." So now, here we are. Porsha is supposed to receive $40,000 a month in spousal support. Simon owes her $224,000 in legal fees. She has 36 months to refinance or sell the house, but now there's an attorney's lien attached to the property, which directly reduces whatever equity might exist. And if Simon owes other debts, which I strongly suspect he does, this may not be the last lien placed on that house. So no, this divorce saga isn't over, not even close. Just when it looked like Porsha had finally won, reality stepped in and reminded us that when scammers scam scammers, everybody ends up exposed. Do I feel sorry for either of them? Absolutely not. You both played games. You both tried to outmaneuver each other, and now the lights are on and all the roaches are running. But now I want to hear from you. Do you think this was Simon's plan all along? Do you believe more liens are coming? And do you think Porsha truly understood what she was getting into when she married him? When the final decision finally arrived, it didn't come with drama. It came with weight. The silence in the courtroom was heavier than anything before. Porsha had entered weeks earlier fighting a case, but now she looked like someone facing the full cost of consequences. The announcement confirmed what many feared. Doors closed, opportunities vanished, platforms disappeared. But here's the shocking part. It didn't feel loud. It felt cold, as if the world had already moved on while she was still processing what had been lost. This wasn't just a career setback, it was a legacy under question. Years of admiration were now discussed with doubt instead of pride. Supporters went quiet. Familiar faces stepped back. The spotlight turned harsh and unforgiving. Even after everything, the questions didn't stop. Was this the end, or just a pause? Could someone rebuild after a fall like this? What made this story different was that it didn't end with clarity. It ended with uncertainty. Some believed she would rise again. Others believed the damage was too deep. What stayed with many viewers wasn't just the controversy, it was the reminder of how fragile public trust can be. One moment admired, the next alone. Families felt the pressure, fans felt betrayed, and the person at the center faced a future no one could predict. And here's the final twist. Even after the verdict, even after the silence, the story refused to end. Discussions continued, opinions clashed. Every new rumor reopened old wounds. What started as a single court appearance became a lasting conversation about power, trust, and the cost of public life. As the dust settled, one truth remained clear. This wasn't just a story people would forget. It became a lesson, a warning, and a question mark that may follow this name for a very long time. And the biggest question still remains. Was this the end of the story, or only the end of the beginning?